Welcome to the Training Manager course. Today we have our first session on the basics of employee training and the competency model for training managers. We'll also cover the latest trends in learning from the world's most respected learning organization. I'm going to talk about the ATD organization, which I recently became a member of. Here we go. Let's start from the beginning. This is the course website. Why take this course? It will teach you how to structure training properly, not using one-off training, but building a systematic learning process from diagnosis to results evaluation to become not just an event organizer or trainer, but a true business partner. That's the purpose of this course. Let me tell you a bit about myself. In case we haven't met, my name is Mike Pritula. I started my career at Alpha Bank. I was both a trainer and recruiter. I would recruit a group of people and train them on how to issue bank loans. The training lasted about 5 days. I conducted the training with a partner. It included theory and practice. We studied the banking software. I remember my voice getting hoarse from the intensity of my first trainings, but it was great practice. Then I worked for STB TV channel, Wargaming, Preply, Ideals, LaForce, and others. I trained recruiters in offline sessions, trained my own teams, and trained executive teams at PDL. Of course, online training came along, which I also did. As a trainer, I've trained over 10,000 people, conducted more than 1,000 training sessions, created over 130 courses, over 10,000 hours of training experience with thousands more added each year. I've been teaching for over 20 years now, and I conduct training in 4 languages. As a professional, I've received many awards, diplomas, and international recognitions. This is to give you an idea of my experience. I have certifications from ACI, HRM, HCI, and I recently became a member of ATD International. Here's a bit about our academy so you understand about us. Our academy has awards, including a YouTube Silver Button and Choice of the Year awards that we regularly receive. I rely on best practices in my work. This course that we'll be taking together is a combination of my personal experience as an HR professional and trainer, plus the best research. Today we'll see the first ATD research because I always combine my personal experience with best practices. That's what I teach. I see we already have several people online. Please write what you do for work. Maybe you're a trainer, learning manager, corporate university director, HR director. I'm curious who's online today, so please write your position in the chat. Those watching on YouTube, please also comment with your job title. This way we can get to know each other. I see all these comments. They come to me as notifications. I read them, reply, and comment. In this course, like all our courses, we have homework assignments to help you practice what you learn and get feedback from me. Oh, I see someone wrote privately that they're an HR saint. Okay, thank you. For all completed homework assignments, we issue a diploma on the International AD platform, so you'll receive an internationally recognized diploma. Our course consists of 10 sessions. We specifically relaunched it to update it with new data and materials. Because learning doesn't stand still, artificial intelligence is emerging, along with many new and interesting things, so we'll be updating all of that. Okay, good. I see another participant's response. Julia wrote, manager of a beauty salon chain. Full cycle from recruitment to onboarding and regular training of specialists. Oh, cool. Thanks for sharing. Today we'll discuss the training manager competency model from the most famous organization, ATD. We'll briefly talk about how adults learn. We'll examine the previously popular ADDIE model and the popular 6D model. Of course, we'll discuss trends and some approaches, which I think is plenty for an introductory first session. So the ATD competency model, there's an organization in the world. It used to be called ASTD, now renamed to ATD, Association for Talent Development. This organization is dedicated to how people are trained worldwide. They developed a competency model that professionals in people development should meet. They constantly update it. This is the most recent model, and they recently updated the design. So if you look at a previous webinar, it was the same but displayed slightly differently. Yesterday I checked their website and saw they changed the design, so I inserted the newer design here to show how it looks now. You know, in every field and activity there are some trendsetters, some influencers that are good to keep track of. I recommend all training professionals follow this particular organization, the ATD Association. You can become a member. There's an annual subscription that will give you access to various free materials. You can get certified, which is in less demand than certifications like PCI. If you want, I haven't seen many requirements specifically for ATD certification, but you can get it if you wish. So let's look at what this competency model requires from a modern expert in people development, from everyone involved in education in one form or another. This new model includes three main areas, three domains, you could say. The first is impact on organizational capabilities. Modern employee training and development is seen not just as some events or trainings, but as a function that develops the organization and has a global impact on the business. Here's what the ATD Association says about this area. This practice area embodies the knowledge, skills, and abilities professionals need to ensure talent development is the primary driver of organizational efficiency, productivity, and operational results. Here, an expert in people development and training needs to understand the business. This is now pretty much a requirement for any HR professional. The ability to do consulting and be a business partner, understand organizational development and culture, be able to build talent management strategies, improve staff efficiency, and know what it depends on. Change management skills, data and analytics skills, and the ability to prepare for the future. That means considering global trends. The second area of this new competency model is called developing professional capabilities. This is about the knowledge and skills talent development specialists need to be effective in their role of creating systems, processes, and frameworks that promote learning, maximize individual performance, and develop employee potential and abilities. This requires knowledge of learning science itself, what's called instructional design. It's designing a complete learning program, a full learning experience. The ability to understand how to conduct trainings, organize facilitation, use technologies, manage knowledge, develop careers and leaders, understand coaching and impact assessment. So in general, these are the subject areas in learning and development that you need to know. And finally, the third knowledge area for modern employee development professionals is building personal capabilities. What does this include? It's understanding how to be effective in the business world. These are mostly interpersonal skills, often called soft skills, needed to create an effective organizational or team culture of trust and engagement. This includes communication, emotional intelligence and decision-making, collaboration and leadership, cultural awareness and inclusion, project management, ethical behavior in compliance with laws, and continuous self-learning. So these are the three blocks of the competency model for learning and development professionals required by the ATD organization. Let's move on. Modern training is not just about what training to conduct, when to do it, how best to organize it, or how to create an employee development plan. As we saw in the ATD competency model, it's also about a deep understanding of how people learn and develop. This is called andragogy. There's pedagogy, which is teaching children, and there's adult education. In this course, we focus on how adults learn. Adults learn very differently from children. But many companies simply don't understand this because every adult has extensive experience of being taught as a child, because if we count, we go to kindergarten. Well, for however many years, 2, 3, 4 years, some maybe 5 years in kindergarten. Then we go to school for 10, 11, 12 years. Then we go to higher education, another 4 or 5 years. Together, this can add up to 20 years. Imagine when we're 25, 30, or 40 years old, we have 20 years. That's a large part of our lives devoted to learning, but learning as children. And it seems to us that this is what learning is, that this is how we should teach. When children are taught, they're forced to memorize, solve exercises, take tests and exams. Very rarely is it connected to any practical application. Very rarely is there any mentoring. And so most adults have a false idea in their heads about how people learn, because this idea is based on their past experience of being taught as children. But adults learn a bit differently. There are slightly different principles at work, slightly different processes, and motivation is structured differently, first of all. A child's motivation in learning is not necessarily important. It could just be coercion. Parents say you have to and punish for refusing to learn. Or a child may just have it by instinct. For them, it's just the norm to go and study. They don't even think about it. Why am I studying here? They're just used to going somewhere, being taught something, doing something, and that's it. They don't think about it. It doesn't work that way for adults. An adult understands that they've finished their studies, passed exams, got a diploma, thank goodness it's over, and there's no need to repeat it. And you don't have to repeat it. No one will punish you. So when an adult starts thinking about learning, motivation plays a very big role. Therefore, in the training system of an expert in the field of people development, a huge role is given to the way adults learn. And that's what we're going to teach you here in this course. Starting now, we'll start talking about it and continue on later. That is, our task will be to build a personnel development system that takes into account that our companies train adults, not children. All right, chuckles. So how do adults learn? Like I said, in adults, a lot of things depend very much on their motivation. That is, whether I want to be trained or not. Motivation depends on the need to know. I mean, do I really have that need to learn Excel or PowerPoint or whatever, or Google spreadsheets, or no such need? From my self-concept, that is what I think of myself in general. I'm a person who is constantly evolving or not. From my experience, I once had a very telling situation in gamification when I was planning executive training. One of my supervisors said I was totally against any kind of training. His name was Misha. Mish, why are you against training? He says, I've had bad experiences. What an experience you've had. Tell me, please. He says they once gathered for an executive training session, and we spent the whole day making origami doves out of paper. Then what? Well, we just spent the whole day making these doves. I made a few pigeons, realized it was bullshit, and walked away. I was confused. I hadn't heard of executive training where you have to make origami doves out of origami. I went to the director of the corporate university, to Yura. Yura, what kind of training was that? Yeah, we had a failed experiment. We were trying out a new coach, and the coach had this idea. He was trying to communicate the need for development through the game. This is the game he chose. We got a lot of bad feedback, so we didn't cooperate with him anymore, and we didn't practice this training. But my one supervisor had a negative experience that I had a hard time reversing. I mean, he envisioned learning as some kind of bullshit to be pigeonholed. Readiness to learn also affects adults because not always a person is ready to learn. When a person has a steamy job, when a person has a bunch of stuff going on at work, they're just not ready to learn. Kids don't have that. They don't. The only thing is that kids who are into sports, some kind of competition, they're not ready to learn either. The other kids have povon, learning orientation. Some people have loved learning since childhood. They have excellent students, medalists, Olympiads. They loved it. They are learning oriented. They can further successful learning. And there are some people who didn't like it, and that's why they don't want to repeat it. Learnability also varies from person to person. That is, not all people have the same learning capacity. Some are more teachable, some are less teachable. There's a lot of nuance here too. The level of ability, that is, learnability is an ability. It may be there, it may be expressed, it may not be there, it may be developed, it may be there but not developed. That also affects. Next, people learn in different ways. There is a division of people into visuals, audials, kinesthetics. This is also important to consider because someone needs to read the text, and someone needs to hear it, and someone needs to print it and hold it in their hands. Learning too can be internalized in different ways. There are times when a person feels like things are going tight for them at first, and then the opposite happens, things get easier. And it can be the opposite, easy at first, and then it's like it gets tight. There are times when a person is kind of stuck. That's what affects it too. Well, and the level of learning, it can be just knowledge without understanding, rote memorized, know but can't explain. It could be understanding, it could be knowing how to use the application. It can be analyzing, synthesizing, even evaluating. These are the levels of learning. How is the training structured? The world has been modeling learning for a very long time, and it can still be found in all sorts of sources, resources, articles, anywhere. The model is an acronym, the basic 5 stages of learning: analysis, design, development, and implementation, evaluation. The model itself is not a bad thing because it reminds us that training is not just about doing the training, but it's also, at a minimum, training needs analysis, good design, how the training will be organized, development, then actually delivering, and then also evaluation. But this model of ED, now I won't say it's obsolete, there's a newer model, a better model, which we'll talk about in a moment. What is very important about learning in an organization? It's a pushback on training needs. The worst teaching is when we teach just because someone asked for something. Yes, there is company training as a benefit. The company simply says to the employee, we'll pay you 1 tuition per year. Or the company will give you $500 a year for training. It's a benefit, then the company doesn't care. You can take a sewing class, we'll pay for it. If training is not a benefit but a tool to improve company performance, then any training should start with a needs assessment. Assessment of training needs should occur at several levels at once. There are tools for that, but on a global scale, it has to be at the organizational level. That is, we analyze what competencies and knowledge people need based on the company's strategy. It's at the unit level, position level, and individual level. So the individual level is also there when an employee says, I think this would be beneficial for my effectiveness, but we need to engage all levels and collect information in different ways. It could be questionnaires, it could be analyzing business plans, it could be an analysis of performance outcomes. From all these sources, we must identify the needs that can be addressed through training. Sometimes people get a little confused. They think they need training for something when in fact some needs can be met with other tools. Then we propose a solution, calculate the cost, approve the budget, and then implement. That's how it's supposed to work. We also need to realize that what we call training is often just a workshop, and that's just one way to develop staff. Good training, which we'll discuss in the course, is usually a skillful combination of different complementary methods for developing people. That's good training. What can be considered development? What are the options? This is behavior modeling, where people are shown how to do something, how to behave. A practical example, some kind of business case, business games, experiential learning, development through feedback, development through succession planning, development through job rotation, special assignments, mentoring, coaching, outdoor training. There are various rope courses, cross-training where people teach each other, share experiences, and exchange knowledge. These are the types of development techniques. Of course, this is only a small set of the most popular ones, but there can be many more techniques. We also need to understand that we'll be talking about trends in the world, and we'll see different types of learning, including on-the-job learning. So we need to understand that learning can generally be divided into 2 scales. The first scale is on the job or off the job, and the second scale is offline or online. Accordingly, we have at least 4 options for organizing training. On the job offline, on the job online, off the job offline, off the job online. And here too, many different tools emerge that help us develop people. So again, we're moving away from just workshops as a form of learning and considering other options like discussions, meetings, correspondence, chats, and so on. Another important aspect of training, which also demonstrates a modern approach, is the evaluation of training. For some reason, many companies simply forget that after any training, it would be good to evaluate the results. There's a long-known model for assessing learning outcomes. It's a very popular 4-level model. We'll be looking at this in more detail in the course. Today, we're getting familiar with general concepts and modern learning approaches. So after the training, we need to evaluate the participants' reaction to the training, what they learned, what knowledge they gained, how their behavior changed, and how their results improved. This is the modern approach to assessing learning. Now let's talk a bit about trends. In the field of training, it's always interesting to understand what's happening globally in the world. So the organization that publishes the most well-known trends is the ATD organization I mentioned earlier. They publish at the beginning of the year for the previous year. So this year, this report is the most up-to-date. The next report will be published at the beginning of next year. So we'll look at the most current report, which is called the State of the Training Industry. Their report says that the average training budget is dropping slightly and is $1,220 globally per employee per year. This figure may seem large to you because your company's training budget may be smaller. The thing is, this is global level data, and salaries around the world, especially considering countries like the USA, are likely higher than in your country. So we can calculate it differently. Typically, this figure is about 3% of an employee's annual salary. So you can take the average annual salary in your company, multiply it by 3%, and figure out what figure would be relevant for you. By the way, I don't know why they released the report this year and called it 2023, but the charts show 2022. That's a peculiarity of the report. Right now, this report is the most current, and I checked, the next one won't come out until early next year. Furthermore, in large companies, the training budget per employee is lower due to economies of scale. Large companies can hire more internal trainers and use more online training, which makes training cheaper per individual employee. In small companies, the training budget is twice as much per employee as in large companies. Next. On average, companies spend about 20 hours of training per employee. Yes, this also depends on the size of the company. Interestingly, in small companies, it's more, in medium-sized companies, it's less, and in large companies, it's even more. So it's kind of an ambiguous trend. It's also interesting that large companies with over 2,500 people spend twice as much on employee training. That's 40 hours a year. Imagine almost an entire week. The next percentage of the budget is for external training. So here we have what percentage companies spend on external training, and here we have the percentage of participants. It's a bit of a complex chart, but we can look at this part. It says here that 35% of the participants in this survey, 35% of participants spend between 10 and 25% of their budget on external training. The next figure is 25 to 49%. So as you can see, a lot of the training costs are internal. Companies don't spend absolutely everything just on external training. What else is interesting? Many companies offer tuition reimbursement. The amount of compensation varies, but it does happen. Number of employees. This is also interesting. Yes, how many employees work on average? But globally, the average training department has 26 employees. And of course, it depends on the size of the organization. In small companies, 3 people are responsible for training. In medium-sized companies, 10, and in large companies, 25. There you go. You can compare it with your own situation. It's a good benchmark for understanding how many people there should be. In our region, if we consider Eastern Europe and Central Asia, the figures are much lower, much more modest, probably closer to the mode. The mode is the figure that appeared most frequently in the report. Probably 1 or 2 is more realistic. Next is the number of company employees per 1 training employee. Also interesting. If you have 1,000 employees, you can calculate how many training staff you should have. Currently, the ratio is about 467 employees per 1 training and development employee. Next, the cost per hour of training. It's growing, meaning companies are spending more per hour on training. Maybe the cost of training is increasing. Perhaps the amount of cheap or free training is decreasing for some reason. Well, these are the trends we're seeing. Next, the most popular training topics from top to bottom. What money is spent on? Onboarding new employees, mandatory training, studying relevant legislation, interpersonal skills, business processes and practices, leadership training, information technology training, customer service, product training, professional knowledge, current manager development, sales training, and basic fundamental skills. That's what the most money is spent on. In small companies, the proportions are a bit different. While on average, all types of companies spend on onboarding, small companies spend more on mandatory training. Training formats. What percentage of time companies spend on each training format? Asynchronous distance learning is the most common, followed by blended learning, hybrid learning, let's say live learning, we call it offline classroom learning, and live virtual learning to a lesser extent. Those are the proportions. Next, broken down by company. Here too, for different company sizes, there are different processes and proportions. Most of all, live formats are still used by the majority of companies. Although online training is becoming more popular, nevertheless, use of technology. 50% of companies use various technologies, including podcasts, videos, all kinds of simulations, micro-learning, and of course, artificial intelligence. 22% of companies, I think there will be a huge increase here this year, thanks to the emergence of ChatGPT. I'm sure that figure will be over 50%. Games, gamification, and immersive technologies, for example, virtual reality, 20%. In terms of organization size, artificial intelligence is used most in large companies, for example, on-the-job training practices. What are companies doing here? Workplace coaching, mentoring. Job shadowing, when one employee observes the work of another employee, assignments, tasks that are, let's say, more challenging than the employee's current level, and various rotational training programs. These are the options that are most used in the workplace. What do the forecasts say? Will training hours increase? Will the budget increase? Will the number of staff increase? 36% of companies believe that budget, staffing, and hours will increase, but the majority we see believe that things are likely to stay as they are. Very few think anything will be cut. So in general, the learning function will continue to exist. Now about the new learning model around which this course will be built. The ADDIE model has now been replaced by the 6D model, 6 disciplines of learning. This model somewhat repeats the ADDIE model. For example, it also includes diagnosis and design, but some things are different here. Here we have elements such as effectiveness, achievements, additional support, and documentation. This involves not just conducting training, as in the ADDIE model, but also follow-up and support after training. This is something we didn't have in the ADDIE model. What's the advantage? The 6D model is maximally business-oriented. It moves away from just a HR-centric understanding of learning. It makes us treat adult learners as adults. Yes, it's specifically geared towards adult learning, not learning like we do with children. It forces the corporate training industry to rethink its approach and offers a structured approach for organizing, understanding, and applying new corporate training concepts. We will be exploring these new concepts in this course. Another interesting model is the 70-20-10 model. It's about how important it is in training to plan not only the training itself, but also practice and interaction with others. The model is well oriented towards this. The 70-20-10 model suggests that if you want to develop a person's skill, whether it's a hard skill or soft skill, think beyond formal training like workshops, courses, or other events. Consider how you'll plan for your employee to apply everything at work. In other words, what kind of assignments you'll give them. Also think about how you'll provide support through interaction with others, with a manager, with a coach, because that's how knowledge is best internalized. This is based on an analysis of how people learn. It turns out that most knowledge people acquire at work comes from practice, communication with others, and a small amount from formal training. The next interesting aspect that distinguishes Model 6 is this. The 6D model views learning not just as knowledge acquisition, but as a way to improve performance. It's very business-oriented. In Model 6, the main goal of training is to raise an employee's performance from the current level to a new higher level. The model also considers that an employee's learning is influenced by the environment. Not everything depends on the employee alone. You shouldn't place the responsibility for learning entirely on the employee. Yes, it depends on the employee, but it also depends on their job, how the workplace is organized, and the surrounding environment. All of this needs to be taken into account. The 6D model also teaches us to view learning and people development as a way to solve any problem. Often there are problems related to motivation, business processes, management, or other factors. So you need to verify if training will truly solve the issue at hand, or if another tool would be better. This comprehensive diagnostic is a big test, analyzing whether training is really needed, or if there are other tools to improve effectiveness. Another important point about the 6D model, which is very interesting, is that it doesn't abandon the employee after the training has taken place. It requires us to ensure that after training, the employee starts applying what they've learned at work, and it provides us with specific tools for this, which we'll explore. Everything here is built around understanding psychology. We'll talk a lot in this course about the psychology of human learning. because many tools used in training are primarily based on how our brains work. Another good thing about Model 6 is that it excellently analyzes learning problems and situations that lead to learning failures and takes them into account to prevent them. It thoroughly analyzes everything, which is why it yields results. And here's the 6D model again for clarity. We'll follow this model with successive lessons devoted to these 6 stages. Then there will be a few additional lessons. The difference from the ADDIE model is that the 6D model is considered broader than the ADDIE model. If other models in the training area like SAM or Agile, it's broader. What can we conclude from today's lesson? Of course, the full research will be available entirely in the personal account for students of this course. You'll be able to read it. And the book, The 6 Disciplines of Breakthrough Learning, for those who want an even more detailed parallel outline. Homework. Those taking the course need to rate themselves on the ATD competency model on a 10-point scale for each competency. Choose 2 competencies whose development will most impact your performance, and consider how, based on the 6D model, you could transfer the learning outcomes of these 2 competencies to your work. What's next? Next, we'll go through all these 6 Ds. We'll start with diagnosis, then design, delivery of training, application of knowledge, support, and effectiveness evaluation. Then we'll examine various methods of people development in detail. We'll discuss organizational development and the company's learning strategy. I invite you to take this course. I'll be glad to work with you. See you soon, everyone who's already on this course. And thank you to everyone who was online with me today. See you soon. Bye-bye.